What the fastest way you've seen someone ruin their life? When I was in college in the early 2000s, a sophomore drove his car into a bunch of kids out partying on a Saturday a block and a half from where I was living. He was going 60 to 70 miles per hour, swiping cars parked on the side of the road before he hit the crowd. I think 4 people died. He got out screaming nonsense before being tackled. Was on a handful of drugs. Last I heard he was in a mental facility. Friend head dived off a fraternity balcony while drunk into a parking lot. He now has 1/2 a brain and is wheelchair bound. Really good friend of mine in college was still living with his parents and had this absolute ditz of a girlfriend who also lived with him at his parents'. They were both 19 at the time and decided to try for a baby. Except neither of them had jobs. Or even their own place. They also did not tell his parents beforehand. Wanting it to be a surprise. Genuinely thinking it would make each other and their parents so happy. Now she's off doing meth again and he's living with his parents still working at Wendy's while his parents takes care of his daughter. All of his income goes to helping take care of her. I had a friend. My old and first best friend in middle school. We were closer than my actual brother. And same for him. He was without a doubt my rock and I was his. He was a very good and talented marching drummer in general. The dude was learning college licks and rudiments top tier in literal hours. It was fucking insane. He got to play with UCLA and USC's drumline at 14 and didn't miss a beat with them. His mom unfortunately passed away when he was 15. He turned to heavy drugs. Insane amount of drinking and fucking anything that walked. I recently saw him in the beginning of March and I won't lie. I didn't even recognize him. It took me a solid 30 seconds to realize who it was that was calling my name. Extremely skinny, bags under eyes, greasy hair and dirty teeth. I felt fucking terrible. I couldn't do anything. But what could I do? He ran away from home. Dropped out of school. Wasn't on any social media. Had no contact with family and honestly, had no family at all besides his dad, aunt, 2 extremely distant cousins and a brother in the Marines. I haven't seen or heard from him since. He could have passed away and I wouldn't have known. High school acquaintances were partying underage and some other kids with drama were buzzing the party in some stupid loud car. Drunk guy thinks the best way to handle this is to throw a huge paving stone at the car on one of its passes. Stone goes through window. Hits passenger. Mid-body, lap, not head. Driver panics and refuses to take passenger to hospital. Apparently everybody was under the influence. She bled out of internal injuries in the hours that followed. Guy who threw the stone is still in prison for manslaughter. ETA sorry whoa here are some answers to the best of my ability. No charges against the driver. Sorry. Yes. Still in jail. Very reticent from all reports. Was trying to mess up car. Not people. Doesn't excuse it. Just a detail about intent. Also I should have maybe rephrased how I know of these people. We were high school age when we met briefly. Not I knew them through my own high school. I had a friend years back. Always kind of an odd guy, but he had a good heart. Anyway, one day, I was hanging out with him and a few other friends and he told us he was going to get a tattoo tomorrow and had this super cool idea. But he wouldn't tell us what it was because he wanted it to be a surprise. We saw him about a week later. He had tattooed 3/4 of his face green. Like, no design or anything. Just solid dark forest green. Basically, he just left the top right quarter of his face normal and the rest was all green. He had been immediately fired from his job the day after getting the tattoo. I kind of lost touch with him shortly after that. Since he moved to another city, I'd heard he wound up living in his car. No idea why he did what he did. He'd had a very good job in IT at a pretty big company and was making decent money. No clue why he thought permanently turning 3/4 of his face green would be super awesome. Edit. Okay. My inbox kind of exploded overnight. I have no idea why he got fired. It was about 15 years ago. And the company he worked for seemed pretty stuffy. For all I know, maybe he actually quit and just told us he got fired. Maybe he'd gone in and did something crazy, inappropriate that he neglected to mention. No clue. As for the tattoo artist, I have no idea who did it. Again, for all I know, he paid some meth head to do it. I don't have any tattoos myself, so I'm really not an expert on the topic. I've got to think there are some unscrupulous artists out there who don't give a shit as long as they're getting paid. Though. Crack. One of my friends went from being moderately functional to losing any custody of his daughter and bouncing in and out of rehabs within like 6 months. 2 years later. And he has a wanted poster with his face all over it in Tennessee. Once my friend told me how he wanted to lose his virginity to his cousin and many other things about his cousin. His cousin's father was right behind him listening to everything he said. When I lived in Vegas, I saw all these people come in and bet it all on black, then lose. Then the stare of disbelief as they realize their mortgage is gone and they have to explain that to whomever they had left at home. A 20-year-old man just killed a woman and her 3 daughters under 6 years old today by recklessly evading police and running a red light in Brampton, Ontario. He is just suffering a broken leg. https. Toronto Sun.com News, local news, children among injured in multi-vehicle Brampton crash. New guy at a factory celebrated finally finding a job by doing a shot at the bar next door during lunch. Got fired after 4 hours of work for it. About 50 years ago, when my great-uncle was in his early 20s, he drove home so drunk that he ran over and killed 2 college students and didn't even realize it. After his initial incarceration, he didn't know how to function as a free citizen, so he keeps getting himself sent back to jail. For example, he got out of jail around a year ago and couldn't make his first month's rent. His solution was to walk to the convenience store, steal a beer, and sit on the curb waiting for the cops to arrive. I was 14 and visiting family in Vietnam. A dude on a motorcycle blazed by on a highway, and a few miles later, I saw several feet of his brains spilled on the road. I was there when my older brother tried heroin for the first time. Fast forward 15 years and he is constantly going to the hospital for abscesses that appear on his arms and legs, and is almost completely cut off from the rest of the family because he's robbed our parents more than once. Every few years he swears he is going to kick the habit. The first few times we collectively ponied up cash to send him to rehab and tried to be as supportive as we could. After the 10th relapse or so, we're too exhausted to even pretend to be hopeful about his newest attempt to get clean. Edit. Thanks for all of the positive feedback. I had a friend in college who had a tendency to act before thinking, but was generally fun and well-meaning. After I had graduated, my friend apparently got coerced by a woman he was trying to sleep with to try heroin just once. As I heard it, he refused initially, then caved because he felt pressured. My friend overdosed and died. Just like that. One bad decision ended his life. Rip Mike. Went to school with a kid who threw a rock off an overpass and killed a dude. Whole life down the drain at that point. Made international news. Edit. Flint, Michigan. Worked in the German social welfare system, aka Sachbearbeiter im Sozialamt. A client of mine said he thinks that my calculations would be wrong after his wife left him, because he got not enough money. I asked him if he had any expenses I didn't know of. He was sure he gave me all infos. I asked him to bring me all his invoices, vouchers, receipts, etc., which he did a few days later. I read all his papers and found a pay slip that I didn't know of. According to my files, he got social welfare at this time, and I had no infos that he had a job with income, which would be social welfare fraud. I kept reading and I found a so-called Versicherungspolice, a insurance policy for a 5er BMW. You should know that back in the day a car was a salvageable capital, aka he had to have his car sold to use that money for groceries, etc. It was mid-90s. It's different now. Then I found the purchase contract for the car, expensive and with installment payments. Then I found the contract with the bank that gave him the loan for the car, so I called the bank and asked them why the hell they are giving a loan that big to an unemployed social welfare recipient. The woman from the bank began to panic, because that's new information to her. And while she was trying to explain what happened, the loan had burst because my client didn't pay, etc. I figured out that something is wrong with the payslip. You should know that in Germany, the 4-digit postal code, including the sublocal code, like 1000 Berlin 44, was changed to a 5-digit postal code, 12,345 Berlin, in 1993. The payslip was from 1995, but the postal code on that thing was from 1993. He forged the payslip to get the loan to get the car because his wife told him he needed a better car to keep her. So he did all this, but Tuesday bubble burst because he couldn't afford to pay the installments. And just because he asked me to recalculate him and brought all his infos without sorting them out properly, I was able to prove that he committed some felonies. Which, by the way, doesn't mean that he ends up in jail or that he gets arrested, etc. He told me the story. I said what I have to do now and what might happen in the next weeks. Both have been charged and convicted of social welfare fraud, insurance fraud, falsification of documents, and sneaking bank loans using fake income information. My stupid ex-girlfriend. In an effort to pay back a loan shark, maced the opening manager of a Blockbuster and stole the bank deposit bags. Then, she went and picked up her niece and nephews, all under age 8, and causally drove around with them. She got felony stopped on a major roadway. Her photo was on the top stories at 10. Led into that evening's NEWA. This happened during the NBA Finals that year. I think it was during Game 6 or 7. So huge viewing audience. Oh. She was easily recognized and apprehended because her best friend was store manager of that Blockbuster and she was there all the time. And she had dropped off an application the day before. She spent the next 3 years in a women's prison.